Meet Adam Jennings, creative director, creative consultant, and all-around self-described creative type.
Although he began his career as an actor, Adam decided to explore storytelling in the advertising industry. He has worked on ad campaigns for major motion pictures, and he teaches others how to be creative leaders as well.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go. So welcome to the show, Mr. Adam Jennings.
Thank you so much. So good to meet both of you and good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
So right at the top, we're going to baptize you into the church of Scratch, Claw, Push with a thing we call the 60-second intro. Billy's going to give you 60 seconds on the clock. She'll cue you, and you're going to tell us who you are and what you do. Things like this is like you elevator pitching yourself to our audience. And after that, we deep dive. And you can think about it like blackjack. You're trying to go up to about 60 seconds, but not over it.
Got it. I love it. Okay. I wasn't prepared for this. Cool. Let's do it.
Just, all right. And go.
Okay. 60 seconds. I'll give you two versions. I'll give you the pro, like polished elevator pitch. I'm a strategic, creative, empowering leader working for the last almost 30 years at agency client side. Across multiple creative disciplines, trusted by global brands like 20th Century Fox, Paramount Pictures, Salesforce, Microsoft, BBC, Penguin Random House, and many, many more. The non-polished version of that intro, the second 30 seconds, I'm a storyteller. I'm a human-to-human creative. I'm genuinely out here. Yes, I have bills to pay, but I'm genuinely out here trying to help others in the creative industry. Help them in ways that I would have loved to have had as I was kind of coming up through the ranks. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, 13.
There you go. I'll leave it at that then.
Man, he did too. Now you're just showing off.
Well, but and he didn't cover everything. So we connected on this platform called Lytro. It's Laetro, and Lytro is run by Dave. I'm gonna forget how to pronounce his last name. Is it Zabrowski?
Dave Zabrowski. Yeah.
He's a former animator for Disney, right? Beautiful visual artist. And so he started this platform for creatives as like an anti-agency sort of thing. It's like a collective almost where, people can come and say, hey, I want this project done. And they'll get a project manager to kind of put a bunch of people together for this. So Adam and I connected on there because there's a huge number of different types of creatives on there. And so what you told me when you messaged me was that you'd done theater, you'd done marketing for all these films. I'm trying to even remember. I pulled it up and I was like, okay, so you're an actor, theater, making websites, computer games developer. Like, yeah. So I guess I want to know, like, how did you go from being an actor to the other stuff?
Okay, that's an interesting point. So most people's careers kind of go like this, right? They kind of go, oh, I'll try this avenue, or maybe I'll try this, and they kind of go between these sort of multiple routes, but it's usually within a fairly kind of narrow band of possibilities. And mine is like this. That may be something to do with me having ADHD, or it might just be how life has happened to me. But so when I was really young, when I was a kid, I loved movies. I loved the visual storytelling of movies. And I wanted to be a stuntman. And the thought of jumping off a building or being dragged on the road behind a truck or flying through a glass window or whatever it may be, somehow, for some reason, seemed really appealing to me. And the older I got, the more clumsy I got. And I realized that's probably not a viable career and I ought to think about something else. So through school, I did sort of, school plays and school musicals, and I really loved it. And it was something that people were giving me praise for. They said, you can do this really well. You've got a natural talent for this. And that obviously encourages you as a kid to do more of the same thing to get the same kind of praise and feedback. When I left school, I went into working in theatre, and I worked in numerous different theatres, and I worked all sort of avenues of it, all aspects of it, on stage, backstage, box office, marketing, really getting to kind of understand, not by plan, but just by how it happened, getting to understand the whole of the kind of theatre ecosystem. And I'm going to show how old I am by saying at the point where the internet came along, theaters were sort of looking at this as like, well, we need a website. Other people have got a website. I don't know what it is, but we ought to have one. And I interested to look into that, and so I offered for one of the theaters I was working at, and I realized that the technology isn't there yet, but this is a really great way of telling a story. This is a really, really great way of finding a wider audience, but also perhaps a more niche audience, one that's your story is really going to resonate with. And then I looked at it from the kind of commercial aspect of, so this theater before the internet had a geographical reach within which they could tell their story, but their story was never going to get further than that. Despite tourism, despite whatever marketing means that you might have, you're not going to get any further. But with the internet, you could tell your story on a global scale, but to people that it's relevant to. And so that was the sort of route from theatre into digital design. But it's always been the backbone of this zigzagging has always been storytelling. So storytelling on stage, storytelling through voice work, storytelling through digital stories, digital platforms, digital methods. I look back at that work now, and it was the kind of revolving @ symbol and the beckoning skeletal finger, like really cheesy kind of digital design. But it was great fun. It was really explorative. I'm completely self-taught in terms of design sensibilities, creativity, coding, whatever it may be. I didn't go to design college or anything like that. It's just something that I kind of happily fell into and built a career from.
So you mentioned before that you were, when you're in your 60-second intro, you mentioned, wanting to help people avoid pitfalls that you made, and I have a lot of the same feelings about, the zigzagging and I don't know, when you are in that, you wonder, like, if I could do it over again, would I do it differently? Because it made me who I am, and it made my sensibilities what they are, and maybe my storytelling is very different than people's who went to school and all got taught by the same people. And so maybe it is good. But then also you can look back and say, yeah, but if I could just have avoided these two things and wasted less time, then maybe. So I guess, what are those things that you want to help other people avoid in the creative world?
Oh, that's a great question. And I like the kind of undertone that's hidden behind the front of the question as well. That's great. So I think that drive to help others, has always been there. I've always mentored creatives in my teams. I've always tried to help clients, on a human to human level, sort of understand what their challenges are and how we can help with them outside of the project that we're working on together. And last year, I finished a big contract with the sort of Uber experience design agency, Fantasy Interactive, out in San Francisco, and I had some time on my hands, and I was chatting with my partner about, well, what do I do next? What's the next thing? I've been doing this for 28 years. It's time for a change. Like, this is a sign to do something a bit different. And she said, you've been talking about these courses, these training courses. Why don't you just pick one and sit down and write it and just see how it turns out? You don't have to do anything with it, but just write it. And so we worked on that together and did a soft launch last November. It's called Supercharged Creative Leaders. And the idea behind that course came from something that I heard time and time again from creatives. And that's, there's no one to teach you all the non-practitioner skills. How do you lead a team? How do you give feedback that lands? How do you understand a budget? How do you win business? How do you grow client accounts? All of these things that, as you progress through the ladders of your career in the creative field, you at some point you get those landed on your plate as responsibility, but you've never really, unless you've had a great manager or a great mentor, you've never really been properly taught how to think about these things. You might be fantastic at your craft, but those side of things have always been kind of left to one side. And certainly for me, I've had to teach myself how to do all of these things. And so the course, it's a one-day program. It's really intensive. It's 30 years in 8 hours, basically. And I go through 9 steps from hiring your team to becoming an effective team leader to slashing client churn to maximizing your margin to winning new business, growing accounts, and then championing company strategy, which is basically the sort of start of getting your feet at the kind of executive or leadership table. And so as we go through those, each topic is filled with pain points for creatives. It's very much focused on these things, these challenges that as creatives in a leadership position or working towards a leadership position, we hit time and time again. And I then go through with each one of those. There are about 120 pain points that I go through over the 8 hours. And with each one of those, I go through either here's how I handled that successfully, or here's the mistakes that I made, and here's how I course corrected those mistakes. And it might be a framework, or it might be a practical method, or it might be a sort of conceptual approach to something. But it's very much the idea of wanting to kind of highlight, hey, look, this happens. Don't worry about it. You're going to make mistakes like this. I did, they did, she did, he did, like whoever it is, we've all made these mistakes. And when you boil them down, they're roughly the same mistakes that everybody makes. And so how do you spot them ahead of time and kind of sidestep them? And encapsulating all of that into this program has been really, really helpful for me. I'm certainly someone who, at least before the last kind of 6 or 7 years, I was someone who didn't look at the successes I had. I was worried I would get complacent or arrogant. And so I didn't allow myself the time to go, you know what, I've done a great piece of work here, or the client's really happy with that, or I've won this award, or whatever it may be. I didn't allow myself the time to just take stock of that, you know? And so writing this course out, and then launching it and having attendees come through has been really, really wonderful experience for me. It's also been really humbling. I have approached this to help them in very practical ways. And it has been, the attendees have given me the feedback to say this has really helped them practically, but also on another level, it's really impacted them positively. One attendee said, I'm opening up new paradigms in his life. You know, and I was blown away by that. And I'm so thrilled for him and the others that this impact is happening through this, because I want them to walk away with real tangible skills and experience that they can use, but they're also walking away with this massive boost of enthusiasm and this massive boost in drive and energy. One attendee got the train from London to Edinburgh to do the course. It's about a 4-hour train journey. He came up, we met in the morning, he did the whole thing in one go, an 8-hour day, full on day. And then he had a 4-hour train journey back. And I said to him, you've had a big day. There's a lot going around in your head. Just relax, put your feet up, metaphorically, and like have a coffee and just relax on this train journey home. Yep, no problem. Will do. Got it. Understood. 2 hours into his journey, I got an email from him. I've booked this meeting and I'm going to do these one-to-ones and I'm going to go for this goal and that goal. And like, he was so energized by it all. And it's so lovely to see that. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but like generally I've tried to kind of encapsulate all of these things that creatives so often fall into and help people sidestep them.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you know, with the course, you know, because I can look back at theater and obviously there's not a lot of money in theater. So like, I don't know how useful it is, but like, you know, there's things that I just wasn't taught. You know, they don't teach you the business side. And I took a business of acting class in college, but it was one class and it taught me the old way. It taught me the things that were passing away, you know, regional theater and all this stuff. And union, like it's like, it did not prepare me for this world where gig economy, everything's online. You can just book a job in 2 seconds by yourself. Like, it didn't teach me how to form relationships. It didn't teach me any of the real selling, marketing, business side of stuff. And so like you, I learned a lot of that from working for theater companies that I then had to be like, hi, I'm your only employee and I'm going to do all your marketing, PR, and audience wrangling, and I'm going to build you a database. So I'm going to learn coding and I'm going to do all these other things. And, you know, those are things that at the time, like you said, you you don't see how valuable some of those things are.
Mm.
That the value you offer is way bigger than what you're actually being paid, right?
Mm.
Um, so I guess where I was trying to get with this is that I wonder if something like this, do you think there's a version of this, of your course, for every industry? Do you think that there, is something like that that would be helpful for every industry?
Absolutely. And I think the key to that, the key to unlocking that, is understanding that creativity is helpful for any industry. And that's not necessarily just about how creative your marketing campaign is, or your advertising is, or your product experience is. It's also thinking creatively. How can I do this differently? How I have this service that people are telling me is great, but no one knows about it. So how can I tell that message or that story differently? I'm in a crowded marketplace. How can I be creative in standing out from the rest of the marketplace? And so I think understanding that creativity and allowing creativity to flourish, allowing yourself and your teammates and your clients, if that's relevant, to have these sessions where you can just go, you know what, I'm going to forget about budget for the time being. I'm going to forget about timelines for the time being, or technical requirements or specifications. And we're just going to say, well, what would be the best way of doing this? What would be the most amazing way of telling this story or launching this product? And then you can always, once you've got those concepts, you can always come and say, okay, well, we need to put some guardrails in around finance or timelines or technical feasibility or what have you, and kind of refine the idea to fit within where you need to be. But the course, when I started writing it, I was going to aim it completely at creative directors. That was who this course was going to be for. And the more I wrote it and the more I talked with those in the industry, the more I realized actually this is for everybody. If you're a creative leader, this is going to help you do the things that are on your plate right now. If you're an ACD working your way up to a creative director level, this is going to help you not only with the things on your plate, but get your promotion. If you're right down the other end, a junior, this is going to help you go through everything much quicker, not because you're doing these jobs right now, but because you understand what your leadership are doing. So you can help them. You can build your experience by spotting what's going on and offering some help or support. And if you're way past CD, if you're an ECD or an SVP or a group head of design or whatever it may be, you can look back at this and go, oh, you know what? I've kind of lost sight of some key things here. I need to bring those into my day-to-day. And I think all of the things that I talk about in the program they're all based around my approach, which is human to human. It doesn't matter if you're a direct report of mine, if you're a boss of mine, if you're a client of mine, if you're my client's boss, we're all human. We all have bad days and good days. We all have challenges. And so when you start to look at that, you start to realize different ways of dealing with it. For example, we have all worked in situations where we have, quote unquote, a difficult client. But what does difficult actually mean? That's a person on the end of the phone or the end of a video call or the end of an email, probably having a really shitty day. Something has happened that's probably not anything to do with the project you're working on. It's a stressor for them. It might be their leadership, but they might have real pressure to launch this thing or whatever it may be. Or it might be just something completely out of the blue. Maybe they pranged their car in the morning. Who knows what it is? But when you start to think like that this is a human who's having a crappy day, how can I help them? Instead of being combative and being like, yeah, but you're not listening to my creative idea, just think about, okay, this is a human that needs some help, and reach out to them, And so everything about that course is human to human. Now that can be transferred to any industry, theater, film, marketing, clothing, food packaging, like whatever. Like we're all humans. We're all doing a job. We all have good and bad days. So yeah, I think absolutely this program and the, whilst it's very sort of geared towards the creative fields, I think the concept behind all of the solutions would fit nicely into pretty much any industry. I put a challenge out to anyone listening to this, not in the creative fields, to attend the course and see if it does or doesn't work in your industry.
Is this all in person?
It's in person, either in a room together or remotely. I've been doing quite a few sessions remotely with people from other countries. One guy in Mexico, and another one in New York, and we can split it however. It's set up as a 1-day intensive thing, but maybe we do it as 2 4-hour slots. Maybe we do it as 4 2-hour slots. However it works with people's schedules. It's quite flexible, really.
So it's more of an interchange. You haven't done like an asynchronous sort of video recording or anything like that yet?
Oh, no, no. I mean, at some point I'll turn this into an evergreen course and or a version of it into an evergreen course, and then people can take it at their own pace. But for now, one of the things that I was very conscious of writing it is I want this to be a wall of information that hits you. I want you to get 30 years in 8 hours. Boom. And the things that stick with you at the end of that day are the things that are relevant for you right now. And it doesn't mean that everything else isn't going to help you. It means that it'll store away somewhere. And when you need it, you'll help it. You'll find it and it'll help you. But right now, the things that stick are the challenges you need to solve. And it's one technique rather than sitting with them at the beginning of the day and saying, okay, so what challenges are you facing? What do we need to solve today? Because they'll tell you the things that aren't really that important. They'll focus on the crappy email they got from their boss the day before, and that's not really the important thing. So there's a lot of discovery. It is a set framework, but I send a questionnaire to the attendee beforehand. If their boss or their agency or studio have sponsored them to come on it, I also talk with their management and ask them questions. So I understand a little bit about the attendee at the beginning. And then we tailor the day based on what they perceive their gaps to be and their challenges to be and their strengths to be. So maybe we spend slightly less time on slashing client turn and slightly more time on winning new business, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to, since you did mention, being of a certain age where, there are those of us who can remember a time before the internet, and being in that time where it's brand new and nobody has it figured out, to where now you've got, someone like yourself who can go out and teach courses about here's how you get your thing across on the internet. Like what, I mean, as far as like developing like guiding principles and or strategies, like how does that come about, and what is the, I guess, if you're trying to like impart, very specific things to your client, or maybe like just a few things that are going to get, give them, that they can run with for a long, long way. What are some of those like, what are some of those like guiding principles or strategies that when you're first kind of getting someone kind of, letting them kind of, dip their toes into the pool and start kind of wading into the shallow end? Was that, what are you trying to teach them up front to kind of like, I guess, what are some of those things when you're kind of getting them, okay, these are the things you need to know as you're starting out, or even if you're just people you're working with, so they can kind of get their heads right and kind of start thinking. And, like you said, that one guy where suddenly like the whole world is opened up to him. Like, what's the first page in that book?
I think the first page in the book is, and this might not be the answer you're expecting, but the first page in the book is to look after yourself. You have to, there's the whole thing of, put your gas mask on before you put it on others, before you help others. And it's so true. And I've only been able to see that. I'm 45 and I've only been able to see that maybe in the last 7 or 8 years as a result of my incredibly patient partner who has, really opened my eyes to a very different way of living. And so what I would say is, as you're approaching leading a team or working with clients, make sure you have the energy to do the job to the level that you want to do it to. And that's the obvious things like eating well, getting some exercise, keeping healthy, all of those kind of things, getting good sleep, et cetera, but also looking after yourself. There was one attendee I spoke to, not an attendee, sorry. It was a webinar I was giving. And one of the people on the webinar was asking about when you have a difficult client, she was saying, I feel like I'm trying to keep hold of the client and the client's anger and the client's stress. And then I'm trying to kind of consume it. And then when I go back to the team, I have all the smiles on and I'm trying to keep it all nice and nice for the team. and I don't know quite what to do. I've really tried with the client, and they're just not. It's not a good fit. What do I do? I don't want to kind of be sort of fake to my team. And I said, okay, there's two things. One, I'm hearing that you're overwhelmed. So the first thing you need to do, if it's safe for you to do so, is get yourself outside, go for a walk in fresh air, breathe some fresh air. If you can find, I'm a massive proponent of a thing called green time. When you're stressed or you have a problem to fix, go and sit in nature, somewhere with lots of trees or grass or bushes or plants. And if it's a tree, for example, look at the way the leaves are moving in the wind. Look at the way the sun is coming through the leaves, the shadows it's causing, and spot the patterns. Put all of your focus on those leaves. And everything you're stressing about will slowly drop away the more you're focusing on this greenery. And if there's a problem you're trying to fix, the answer might kind of pop up as you're doing that as well. Also works brilliantly with water, looking at the ripples, looking at the way the sun shines on the water, the way it's moving. So I said to her, get outside, take a breath, get some fresh air, get some sun on your face. Calm, like relax yourself. Let that overwhelm slowly kind of go away. Secondly, talk yourself through that you have tried everything you could with this client. You've been nice to them, you've been accommodating to them, you've been understanding for them, you've gone over and above in terms of what you've delivered to them, and it's still not quite right. At some point, you will come across, just like when you're trying to make friends outside of work, people that, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. You can't get that connection with them. You can't build that working relationship with them. And that's okay. You've done everything you can. So it's time for you to say, okay, I'm going to have a call with them. It's not going to be the most pleasant call. I'm going to come off the call if I need to. I'll go for a walk or what have you. And then I'll put that to one side. And then the final thing that you need to do, once you've looked after yourself, is then look after your team. And that's not being fake to them, because they will have seen how the client reacts. They will have seen how difficult the conversations are or how combative the client is. So acknowledge that with the team. Let them know that you see it as well. Let them know that their reality of this is true. You're not ghosting them. You're not gaslighting them. You're not trying to make them believe something that they can clearly see is happening. So but the crucial bit is to do that first piece for yourself. Let the overwhelm settle. Take yourself away from the call. Go through everything you've done to make sure, no, you know what? I've done everything I can here. And then you can move forward with something else. So that's what I would say. Look after yourself first.
It sounds like, because I've worked in an ad agency as a receptionist for 4 years. So I got to be the fly on the wall while watching a lot of this stuff happen. And it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that you have to process what that client's giving you, because otherwise the danger is you either go back and you paste on the smile and your team knows you're faking it, or you go back and you just vent about the client at them, but then you're just poisoning the air for your team, and then they don't want to do great work for this client either. So it's just making it worse, right? So I love what you're saying about sort of protecting your own mental health in the advertising industry, because that's a topic I see come up all the time on LinkedIn. People get burned out so much, and there are a lot of toxic personalities, especially I think in higher up positions sometimes. But that's true in a lot of industries. It's true in theater. And so I'm curious if you have anything else about, to say about the idea of mental health or burnout in the ad industry, and besides the green time, which I love that too. I'm very into that as well. Besides that, like how people can protect themselves so that they're not, burning out by the time they're 40 and just like, ugh, I got to find a new career. I'm going to go back to school,
Yeah, for sure. It's like looking after yourself physically and mentally is so important, as I've discovered. I've had huge bouts of depression. I've had ups and downs. I've had mental health challenges, and it's so easy to push yourself and to keep kind of trying to push forward. Oh, I should do this. I ought to do that. I must be this person. I must be this leader, and there's only a spiral down to the bottom. Like you need to look after yourself. So yes, I can sit here as a non-health professional and say, hey, green time is great and getting fresh air, but there's nothing that beats having professional help if you need it. So going to a therapist, going to, getting that kind of real, proper professional help and support if it's needed. And by if it's needed, that could be preventative as well as reactive, right? Like if you notice these things, there's nothing wrong in reaching out for help in that way. There's absolutely nothing wrong in it. There's still a stigma attached around asking for help with your mental health, and it shouldn't be. There's zero wrong with that. So there's always that. There's other avenues as well. If you're thankfully like not in that path, but you feel like you're going down there. What about life coaching? What about mentoring? These are things. My partner is a life coach, does a fantastic job at it, and it's a huge benefit to other people. And these are other avenues that can really help you get the support you need to look after you before you then help other people in a leadership position in a relevant way. But yeah, absolutely. I'm not for 1 second suggesting you come off a call with a difficult client and swallow it and like retain that in yourself. You need to find avenues to get support and let things go. Let things go is a very invalidating statement as well. I don't mean it quite like that, but I think you know where I'm coming from.
I get it. Yeah, I agree with you that telling people just to let things go is not ever helpful.
Woosah.
Yeah.
It's taking it in and like turning it into something else. It's processing it, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was so what, I mean, obviously at this point you've worked with a lot of clients, and I'm sure there are times, working with various people, there's people who just don't get it, or maybe you're working with people who maybe aren't creatively inclined, but because they're on like whatever business team or whoever, you have to work with them. So like, what are some of those strategies for breaking through to someone when you've got this idea that's going to help them, but maybe they're just not seeing it? Like, how do you bridge that gap in those instances?
That's a really great question. And one of the things that I really kind of drill down on in the program is the difference between helping a client get on board with a creative idea and manipulating them, right? You don't want to do that second piece, because if you don't approach this authentically, it's never going to work. They might be on board for a little bit, but the second it doesn't quite perform well enough or in the way that they need it to, the second they will drop it like a hot potato. So you've got to approach this in an authentic way. And the best way of getting a client on board is to understand what their goals are. And by that, I don't just mean they need to increase sales or they need to increase brand reach or whatever. Like, why? Why do you need to increase sales? Why do you need to get more people? Who are the people that you need to get buying this specifically? And what are their problems? What are the users' pain points, or what are your customers' pain points? And really dig down into finding out what that story is on an emotional level. Why does this client need a new app for pet DNA? Or why does this person need to buy this sneaker as opposed to another sneakers? Is it just the sort of visual appearance of it? Is there some physical beneficial help in training? Like, what is it? Why is your product, service, brand the thing that these people need, and why do they need it? So when you really drill down with them, three things happen actually. One, that client sees that you're invested, sees that you want to understand on a really granular level what they're trying to achieve and why they're trying to achieve it. Two, that client, as they're explaining it to you, becomes the expert. You allow them to impart their expert knowledge in their field, their industry, their service, their brand, their product, whatever it may be. Makes them feel good, makes them feel heard. Now, don't believe that that's manipulative. That's part of your job to hear them. But if that's a happy byproduct of that, that's going to help you connect with the client. And then when you get to that point, like I was saying earlier about remove the guardrails and let creativity kind of soar, get the client involved in those conversations. And it doesn't matter if the client is creative or not. It doesn't matter if the client is in a creative role or not. Get them involved in those conversations. everybody has ideas. Everybody can contribute to a creative session. They don't have to be able to draw. They don't have to be able to code. They don't have to be able to write copy, but they can have ideas and they can feed into that. And when you then do that second piece of refining the ideas to budget or technical feasibility or whatever it is, get the client involved in that again as well. And what will happen is two things. One, they will, in that big brainstorming session, they will have seen the benefit of spending a little bit more or going slightly bigger with the idea or whatever it is. And so when you then come back to applying the guardrails, maybe they'll unlock a bit more budget for you because maybe they'll see the benefit in it, but they will also definitely have some ownership in the idea. So when the TV commercial airs, they'll be like, hey, that bit with the ladder, that was my bit. I said that to their friends or their family or what have you, you know, and they suddenly have ownership in it. And that's when they buy into the idea. And they buy into an idea that is authentically hitting all the right beats for the target that they need to get. Does that make sense?
I have a piggyback off of that one because I just sort of had an intuitive thing that I'm going to ask you if this is true. So as an actor, when you're in school, your teachers will tell you need to be more specific, right? They always want you to make these super granular choices because the more specific you are, the more real it seems, right? And so a bad actor will make very generic choices. And I would think, in general, bad art is when somebody makes very generic choices that don't have a motivation or don't have a connection to something real, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about clients who need to come up with those specificities for themselves, right? You're talking about how to get them to say, why do you need this? Why do you need to sell to this person specifically? Who is that person specifically? What is your brand specifically? What are you trying to say with this brand?
I think they call that a brand story is the term that they like to use nowadays.
Right. But what I'm getting to is that I have found in working with people, just in general, because I do some coaching and have worked with people in accountability groups and have worked with a lot of actors. And I'll say, well, what's your goal? And they'll say, I just want to make money acting. And I'm like, well, that's not specific enough because that was my goal. And it led me to be a standardized patient. It led me to do community theater. It led me to be an Elmo at birthday parties. It led me to, all these things that are ostensibly in the realm of acting. I was making money acting when I was a sexy nurse singing a telegram. But was I doing what I really wanted to do as an actor? No, because I was afraid to be specific. Right? And so people are afraid to be specific because they're afraid that they will rule out opportunities or possibilities. So I guess what I'm getting to is with you and with your people that you're talking to in your own life and with your clients, how do you see specificity as an important ingredient, and how do you lead both your clients who you're trying to help them avoid the pitfalls you faced and your clients on the agency side? How do you lead them to being more specific when they are afraid to be more specific and rule out what they see as potential money or potential opportunity?
That's a great question. There are two routes spring to mind. One is based on a storytelling workshop that I give to creatives. And this storytelling workshop works for any creative in any discipline. So UX, illustration, brand, motion, whatever it may be. And the idea there, I set them a task and I say, tell me a story about how you woke up one morning and you went to the shop and buy apples. And typically most people will start with that. I woke up and I put my clothes on and I went downstairs and I walked to the shop and I bought 4 apples and I came back. And I'm like, okay, that's a great start. But like, what were you feeling? What do you mean? When you went to buy these apples, what were you feeling? I don't understand. Well, you've woken up. So what's the first thing that happens when you woke up? Are you stiff? Is your back aching? Are you thinking, oh, God, it's another day. Like, I don't want to do this. Or are you like, oh, yay, this is awesome. It's another day. When you walked to the shops, what was the weather like? What do you mean? Did you have sun on your face? Was it raining? Was it windy? Was it cold? When you got to the shop, was the choice of apples that you wanted there? Or did you have to get a different, And so really helping them understand the way that story the crucial part of a story is the emotional resonance that you gain from the audience in the details, in the specificity that you put in the story, in terms of the emotion that you're feeling, things that people can instantly feel. Like you talk about walking outside and having the sun on your face. You're both now probably feeling warmth on your face, like the memory of warmth on your face from the sun. You know, it's something that everyone can relate to. And so I think part of the answer to your question about helping clients see that is doing an exercise like that within a workshop environment or something like that, or even maybe just in conversation, but helping them think about the specificity of the product or the service or the brand messaging. And then the second part is entirely like escaping me now, but it was a really good one. But
well, then I'll ask: have you had a client, specifically in the realm of, like, hey, we need this to be more specific? Have you had them resist getting more specific with either a campaign or a brand, where where you kind of, because I guess I'm not quite seeing how.
I actually have something, because this is actually something I think you've mentioned in the past, Billy.
Yeah.
That sometimes I think it was the idea that a good brand can
Repels
alienate just as many people as it attracts, and maybe
Yeah.
that's not always a bad thing, because that's like, not every product is for everybody, right?
Right.
Like even like movies have a certain audience that they're shooting for. So
Right, that
how
you
do you
can't
get
do
people over
everything.
that hump, like where it's like, okay, we're going to go, like at some point, like the road's going to fork and you guys say, okay, yeah, we're going to lose all these people over here, but we're going to get these people over here. And how do you make that decision?
Yeah, that's exactly, thank you, because we've got to the second thing that I'd forgotten that I wanted to say. So that's exactly it. And the thing to think about here is a movie trailer, right? If you think about a movie like Sideways, great movie, low key, quite a sort of standard band of energy with a few laughs along the way. The trailer for that is packed full of laughs. So you watch that trailer, think, I'm going to go into a movie that's really funny. And it's quite like emotionally impactful, that movie, right? It hits you quite hard. So there's a complete disconnect between the experience of the trailer and the experience you're going to get when you watch the movie. Now, everything that I've done throughout my career is to make sure that this experience over here matches this one over here. Case in point, the BBC years ago had launched an entirely different kind of cookery show called the Hairy Bikers Cookbook. It was these two guys who, randomly enough, one was in location scouting for movies, one was in makeup. Two guys who became friends on the set, I think, of a Harry Potter movie. They both love bikes and they both love cooking. And so they pitched this idea of a show where they would drive off around Europe. They would sort of pull up at a market, buy the food and cook it right there and then buy their bikes, oil all over their hands, like grubbiness and messiness. So it was a completely different kind of cookery show. And the production company came to me to ask me to create their website for them. And when I'd watched a few of the episodes, the sort of rushes or the clips of the episodes, understanding, okay, I get what needs to happen here. This website needs to have that grubby, rough and ready feel. Because if you come to a really polished, clean looking website with crystal clean cutlery and crockery and the pans are bright and shiny, and then you watch the show, it's going to be nothing like it. And so what's going to happen is you're going to attract a bunch of people that want to watch an entirely different kind of show. They're going to watch the show and they're going to be disappointed. And so you're going to have bad publicity, bad reviews. It's not going to help. If you make this experience match the end result, you're going to have motorbike enthusiasts. You're going to have people who love cooking, have no formal training and just want to get stuck in and try different flavors. They're going to come through it and they're going to love it. And you're going to get amazing reviews and amazing feedback. It's the same with the trailer. You cut the trailer together to give the correct impression of the movie. People are going to watch the movie and love it, but it's going to be the relevant people that love it. So you've got to help the client understand, okay, I understand that one of your success metrics here is more eyes on this product, but how about we change that slightly to more relevant eyes on this product? You want to have the right people looking at it. It's so true to say that the power of word of mouth is far greater than anything you could ever do in advertising. And so if you have a whole bunch of people telling you, hey, I've just bought this product, I've watched this movie, it's amazing, you love it, that's far more powerful than watching a trailer. Likewise, if you have a whole bunch of your friends and family saying, I watched this movie, it was crap, I don't want to see it, or I played with this product, it was crap, I wouldn't recommend it, you're never going to touch it either. So you want to reduce that second possibility as much as possible and increase the first one through specificity.
I think you talked a little bit about this before, how, pre-internet, we were very limited to what we had locally. And so the options available were very limited. And so it wasn't as important to have your marketing, your branding be a certain way, because if you were the only Chinese restaurant in town, you were the only Chinese restaurant in town and people would go there anyway, right? But now it's like, with the internet and with knowing like, oh, well, actually, if we just go 20 minutes away in this other town, they have a better Chinese restaurant. Like, oh, look at their website. Oh, look at their menu. You expand what is available. There's so much content in the world now. There's so much to be aware of. I will see these what do you call the when advertising agencies do their case studies, right? So I'll read these case studies and audition for these case studies, and I'm like, I've never heard of this thing. I don't know who this influencer is. I don't know what this product is. I've never heard of this. And they'll be like, we got 3 million, impressions and blah. I'm like, wasn't me at all. And so you're right. Like, to have people who are like you, because, we tend to associate with people like us, say, oh, I watched this movie, it was so good. And then you hear somebody else say the same thing, and they're like, so all of a sudden you're watching some TV show that you'd never heard of because like 5 people said, oh my God, it's amazing, right?
AKA organic reach.
Right. And so you're right. Like it is more important to have a strong pull and reach the right people than to reach just everybody, because it doesn't work anymore.
And that's quite a scary concept for some senior execs to get their head around, not because they don't want to see it, but because they're so focused on numbers, stats, data, metrics. And so you have to work really hard with your client stakeholders to help them tell the story of specificity and data. And that's where, especially in the world of product design, really thorough, really well-versed research departments are worth their weight in gold. It's lots of creatives, especially in advertising, especially of a certain age, will kind of recoil in horror at me saying, oh, research is the king, and you should really have a really great research department. But you cannot knock it when your research department knows what they're doing, and they can help you tell the story of specificity to your client and enable your client to tell their exec leadership, who just want a return on investment, who just want to see an increase in sales, who just want to see an increase in brand reach, or whatever it may be. If you can help say, there's a more powerful set of metrics that we're hitting, you are looking at this dial going up, and that's understandable. But if you look at this dial going up and you figure the data, or you route the data back to the finances or to whatever it may be, you see that this dial is way more powerful. And that is a really, really crucial tool in getting a client on board.
I'm curious in the idea of striking that balance between going big for the biggest audience possible, or when you say we're just going to hit the niche. We know we've got like these people over here, like that they're just waiting for us to give, waiting to buy our product or, go see our movie or whatever. But there's also, because you see it like the big thing, like comic book movies. Like, they know that they've got those hardcore fans that they throw it out there. They're going to go see the movie. But you're also trying to get these other people who might be, or like I would say, I like the term, like, interested laymen. Like they're maybe not hardcore comic people, but they'll come check this out. Because if it's the happening thing, that, someone, they may not know who Deadpool is, but they like Ryan Reynolds. He's funny. And then they think, oh, this movie looks cute. Looks fun, and it's kind of poking fun at other comic movies. How do you strike that balance, or or sometimes you know when to just to throw it out. So it's like we're gonna go all niche or we're gonna go all big. Like what is that? Take us through that decision making process and kind of like, because especially now with the internet, you know, I remember in the days of yore when they were talking about like, oh yeah, when this internet thing comes online, you're gonna, you know, the advertising is gonna get like super specific, and we're already seeing it now with like Facebook because they're gathering all this data, so they know. You know, we all probably had the thing where you get like an email or you having a conversation, or maybe you mention something in your comments, and suddenly you start seeing ads for it.
Yep.
So you can now get super specific about what you're, you know, who you're targeting and kind of why. So I'm thinking like in the age of the internet and all that, because again, like you said, they always want more. Where is that balance? How do you strike it? And then at the point, like, and I guess even also like on the flip side, at what point do maybe you just decide there isn't a balance? Like what's that decision-making process like in those instances?
I think the perhaps frustrating but honest answer is it varies so much from title to title, especially if you're talking about movie marketing. From title to title, it varies so much. I worked on digital campaigns for all of the X-Men movies up to Logan, and including Deadpool. And the reason that the Deadpool campaign was so effective was because it was different, and because it did go, hey, you know what? Because this movie is so different to all the other X-Men's, we can talk about this in a different way. We can try and reach out to different audiences. They released it on February the 14th. So there was a whole bunch of messaging around Valentine's Day. Yeah, exactly. You know, and when you think, okay, so there's a mercenary who has this accident and gets mutated and looks disgusting and like kills loads of people, and there's lots of, you know, swords and blood and blah blah blah. Yeah, that's a Valentine's Day movie. That's a movie to go to see on a first date. You know, like that's completely left field thinking, but it was brilliant. It was a really great way of doing it. They also had a fantastic salesman in Ryan Reynolds with all of the pieces that he was very happy to kind of jump into and do and record and release and whatever. But it worked for that movie. Would that have worked for X-Men Days of Future Past? No, it's an entirely different proposition in terms of the title. And the X-Men ones are actually quite an interesting sort of case study to talk about, because there was you know, an ardent fan base of the comic books who knew the storylines. They knew way ahead of the release, they're probably going to like take inspiration from this thread and maybe they'll change it a little bit. But the marketing campaigns on the whole for the movies were focused on, we need to tell the story of the movie to those that don't know the movie, that don't know this universe, that have seen a couple of the other movies from before, but they don't know, oh, they've based it on this storyline. You know, and so then it becomes about the standard things. Who's in it? You know, who are the big names in it that are going to draw an audience because they're in it? Michael Fassbender, for example, like he has a big following. People are going to come and see it because he's in it. Who, with Days of Future Past, they're starting to bring in the old cast from the old movies. So then, okay, who are fans of? How do we talk to the fans of the old movies that maybe haven't come and watched First Class and that, but now we're getting Patrick Stewart and Ian McClelland back in. Like maybe we can talk to them and bring them on board. Then, you know, who are fans of just seeing stuff blow up and helicopters and spaceships and whatever? Like, how do we talk to them, you know, and like bring them in? So there's all these different segments of the audience that you talk to in different ways that you kind of bring together in a relevant way. Would it have been relevant to message people who like rom-coms? No. So we didn't bother with that. Would it have been relevant to message people who like smaller independent movies? No. So we didn't message that segment. So I think there's probably not a blanket kind of concept or route to go, especially in terms of kind of movie marketing, but you can definitely pick and choose who you want as your audience segmentation. And with the advent of programmatic advertising, the ability to reach those segments in smaller kind of niches has become possible and sort of standard practice. It's scary. You sit in a room and you have a conversation with your partner or whatever, and you mention a brand, and then the next day you haven't even typed it in, you've just said it out loud, and then the next day it comes up. You're like, Where's the camera?
Yeah. I
It
had,
it reminds me of the joke where it's like, I was, talking to my wife about, I told her a joke, and then Siri laughed, and then Alexa laughed, and the face, I forget, it's funny, but like, it's like, yeah, it's spooky like that. It's gotten to that point where now I think they've programmed all the algorithm. I'm sure with AI on the rise, it's going to get even more so.
Mm.
But
what's
I mean,
curious? You were talking about the film thing about, marketing towards different people. And I know like on Netflix, they use different thumbnails depending on who they're marketing to. And that kind of whips back around to like theater and stage picture and like what this juxtaposition of these two bodies in the frame says, right? Like, oh, the
Mm.
power dynamic's different. Oh, this one looks more fun, this one looks more mysterious, this one. And so much of this, like you said, is storytelling, and it's just like storytelling in a one picture frame, or storytelling in different ways, right? It's
Mm.
just
I was
interesting.
chatting with an old client of mine at Penguin Random House. They release lots of audio dramas. And when I used to work with them many years ago, I would produce the physical CDs, produce the branding for the show, and then the actual packaging for the CDs as well. Now, hardly any are released on CD. It's all digital. And so she was saying that the really interesting challenge is where you used to have this on a shelf. And so you could have quite small text, you could have quite a complicated visual story. Now it's this on an Amazon search page with 100 other thumbnails.
Mm-hmm.
So this like 120 pixel by 120 pixel thumbnail has to do a hell of a lot of work. So you have to be really quite sort of bold in what you're putting on there, and quite uh, uh, harsh in what you're going to cut out of those concepts. And it reminded me when I started to do packaging for stand-up comedians. I worked with a company, a production company in London, and I'd been working with them for years, and I had a great relationship with them. I still do. And one of the very few clients who I'm okay when they say, I know it when I'll see it, because I actually trust them, like, and they trust me. There's a really good mutual trust between them. Anyway, I was working with them on packaging for DVD release for a stand-up comedian. They'd shot this stand-up comedian in the theater, and they were releasing it. And we had this fantastic idea. It's like really overly elaborate, creative idea with all these different props. And we hired the studio, and we did all the photography, and like, it was going to be great. It was going to be brilliant. And the production company sent that to the distributors, and the distributors said, no, we need the surname in big letters, we need the head big, and we need a microphone. And that's it. That's all we need on the cover of a stand-up DVD. And when they said that to us, we went and looked at a whole bunch of others, and sure enough, it's massive surname, big head, and a microphone, or a microphone on a stand. But that's it. And that's all you need to sell a DVD of a stand-up comedian. And it's so true. Like, there's a different colorway for some. Like, the background might be a really poppy red, or some it might be a blue. But like, other than that, that's it.
That somehow reminded me of like some years ago, I did a Fringe Festival show in Minneapolis, and in the newspaper, because they still have a program, whatever, in the programs you get like a tiny little square like this big, so your show image really can't be like, I did a Fringe show right out of college, and we had like 12 of us in the show, and we all like put our heads together in a circle, and so the show image was just our heads in a circle. It was like so tiny, and it's even gotten smaller since then. And so they're like, yeah, don't try to fit everybody in, just yeah, like an object, like it leads to unfortunately, like you said, it has to do a lot of heavy lifting, so it actually leads to some ways less creativity. It leads you to
Mm,
not be able to do as much, which in some ways
mm,
is a shame, I guess, like that it reduces it to, okay, microphone person, name.
it's like a study in minimalism, though. It's kind of like, which is tricky, because like, you see it like in music. It's one of those things like, growing up, I hated minimalist art, anything like that, because I just thought it's just lazy. And then one day you get older and you kind of realize, after having tried to do something like that,
Mhm.
it makes you and Adam, you can speak to this. Do you feel like it makes you, I don't know, it's like how you have to be more educated or more thoughtful in the sense like you have to know exactly what to leave out versus what to keep in?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the hardest things for me, one of the hardest design challenges for me is iconography for that exact reason. Everything is about what you leave out. How do you simplify that down and still have instant meaning in that icon? And the challenge there is so hard. And I think that's because of the way I approach things. Maybe that's my neurodiversity, but certainly my storytelling is cram everything in, cram all the details in, And so it's an incredibly refined skill set to get to be a great iconographer, or to get to create really minimalist art or minimalist furniture design or something like that. Like it's something that I definitely look at with awe and praise those that are great at it.
Like I love the FedEx logo, because for years I didn't see it, and then someone pointed out, like, if you look at where I guess like the E and the X meet, there's the negative space makes the arrow, and I'm like,
it's mind blowing when you first see it, isn't it?
right, yeah, this because you're just like, oh my god, that's brilliant, and it was something, and it's like if you don't see it, okay, you still see the FedEx, but once you see that, like it just, you go, man, that's just, somebody was thinking on a level that most people probably don't even notice. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but then there are those lists of like one typography gone wrong where they didn't see the thing that looked dirty, right? And you're like, oh god.
Oh yeah, like as the thing is like, because they talk about like the comic book font, like there's certain, like with like they're talking about, like, flick it, but when you see like the way the L and the I come together, suddenly you've got a very different word.
Yeah, and you always, when in those instances, you always baffle at how many rounds of approval has this gone through and no one's seen it. Like, how?
Nobody gave it to a teenage boy is the problem.
Right. It's interesting you're saying about the FedEx one. That's a great example. There's also another one that isn't as clean as that, but it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. The musical Miss Saigon, the original poster for that, had silhouettes of, it's based around the Vietnam War, so it had silhouettes of helicopters flying against a sunset. So it was a sort of maroon background, half a yellow sun, and then black silhouettes. And they were done in kind of brush strokes, almost like, oh, hello. They were done in like brush strokes. I don't know what's going on there with the thumbs up. They were done in brush strokes, almost sort of like, a sort of handwriting, but brush strokes. And you go, okay, yeah, I get it. It's helicopters against the sunset, understood. And then someone points out to you, but if you look at the tail end of those brushstrokes, it's a face. Mm. And then your mind is blown because you've never seen it. You've looked at this logo for a million times, and then suddenly you see the face of the female lead. You see the eyebrow, you see the eye, you see the nose, and you see the mouth, and it's just all in this kind of swoop of a brushstroke. Very, very intelligent, very clever use of that kind of tail end of the stroke to get that effect.
Yeah, and you see this a lot in movies too. Like I found this channel recently that called The Deep Dive, and this guy, like these people are just eagle-eyed in the stuff that they pick up in the movie. One of the things that I love is like they were pointing out in the movie Interstellar, the ship that they use. It's almost like because it's all about time, right? And it's all like the ship itself almost looks like a clock in the circular thing, and there's all in the different segments, like the different numbers on a clock. And I was just
yeah. There's some of the stuff that gets pointed out. Some of the stuff you see, and when you see it, you go, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. But then some of the stuff that you read when people do like the deep dives and stuff like that, you just think that's genius. Those are I wish I'd thought of that ideas.
But that's the kind of stuff you kind of have to do in advertising, right? And sometimes it's got to be like, you've got to almost, because the thing is, like, as artists, you have the like look at me syndrome, and you want people to see the things, but I guess you also kind of have to, there's got to be that part of you that can subdue that enough to where you need to be a little subliminal. It's like, I'm going to throw this out there, and maybe, it's like, not everybody will get it, but the ones that do get it will be like, we'll love it. And that's like, I guess that's a tricky balance to establish.
It is. And it's also, there's a thing where you can go too far with that as well, especially if you start to, and I've been guilty of this, especially if you start to add in sort of in jokes or personal jokes or like hide
Easter
something
eggs.
design. Yeah. Like there's a way of doing that that is clever and fits within the brief, but it's a very fine line to kind of spill over into something that isn't there. I remember making a piece of concept art. It was a poster, sort of concept art for a TV show. Never got picked up, but the poster itself, it was sort of about time travel, and I found a stock image of Winston Churchill, an old British prime minister, as a young boy or as a sort of teenager, and I used him as a silhouette, stood upright against a wall behind the photograph of the actor that they wanted to use. So you would never know that was Winston Churchill. But I also needed, because there was a secondary light source in the photo, I also needed a shadow that went across the floor. And I thought, hey, this is about time travel. So I found a stock image of Winston Churchill as an old man, and I used that as the shadow that went across the floor. And I thought this was incredibly clever, and like, this is an amazing idea. And I presented it to the client. I showed him, and there were other things in there as well. And he was like, yeah, this is great. Thanks. This is really good. I like it. If it's the brief, we're going to use this. We're going to pitch the show for this. And I'm there like waiting for him to notice something that he would never notice, because you'd never know. It's two black silhouettes. Like, if they look basically the same, you would never know what I'd done, And so you can go way too far with that kind of thinking. And the more you distract yourself with that, I think the less truthful the piece is going to be as a whole. But when it works, wow, it's powerful.
That's interesting, because I saw a show when I was in college. I went to see a local theatrical production at a professional theater, and it was about, looping around to Disney, it was about Salvador Dali's time working at Disney. And so it was set in their office at Disney, and the artistic director gave my mom and I a tour of the theater, and we got to see the stage up close after the show. And his set design was so specific and extremely detailed, and it didn't need to be, right? The audience couldn't tell that from the audience, and actors are supposed to act, so it's not like. But I like to think that, like, as an actor, being immersed in something that realistic does help you. And so to me, it was like magical to be like, oh, wow, no, he really committed. All the frames on the wall look authentic. Everything looks like it's a real picture from the time, everything is detailed. The things on their desk say things. I'm like, that's incredible to put in that amount of detail. So even if nobody else appreciates it, you as the artist, as long as it didn't take any more, effort than you had time or energy for, I like the idea that it means something to you, even if, they don't know it's there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think again, it comes down to like doing something authentically, So there are many designs that I've done years and years ago where I've hidden my children's initials in them. No one's ever going to find them. My kids know they're there. I know they're there. That's that. It never got in the way of the design. It never got in the way of anything being sold. And there's something that's meaningful about that. The shadows, using the two different stock images of Winston Churchill. I mean, come on, what was I thinking? That's just pretentiousness for the sake of it, And so I think there's a really fine line between figuring out what works and what's meaningful for you, and having a little bit of fun with the design challenge, and then getting over yourself.
I want to throw you one more question, because we've already passed the hour, but one final question, because I sometimes meet people in advertising who there are people in advertising who are very jaded and who just are kind of like, yeah, we're just selling shit, blah, 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 right? But me, like, I was the weirdo 12-year-old that didn't have like teen bop, posters on my wall. I had pictures of ads, like musicians and ads. It was like all the cool ads in my magazines. Those got torn out. Those meant something to me, And so and there was an ad that I saw a long, long time ago that, like, it got me so bad, like, and the music in it made me end up finding Nick Drake. So I think ads can be really powerful and can affect people in a very strong way if they're really well done. So I want to ask you, of the campaigns that you weren't involved with, do you have a favorite ad that stuck with you where you went, yes, that, and something that stands out to you?
Hmm. There are lots that spring to mind of really amazing adverts that I think, anyone working in advertising would hold up as these were just great ideas. And so I'm trying to think of something that is a little bit more personal. And I can remember as a kid watching movies that I'd recorded off the telly onto VHS. And at that point, the movies were already like 7 or 8 years old, right? It used to take ages for them to come from cinema into home release. So there was an excitement about seeing this movie again that you hadn't seen for a while, but they would break it up with adverts. And I can remember, much like when you've listened to an album over and over again, when you then hear one of the songs on the radio, when it finishes in your head, the next song on the album starts playing, even though you're not listening to the album. I can remember when I watch movies now that I used to watch as a kid, I can remember the specific point where the adverts would start on that recording that I would watch over and over again. And I can even remember some of the adverts. So the adverts themselves weren't great, but that memory of being a kid, loving those movies and watching them over and over again, and watching the adverts over and over again, like that's a really fond memory for me, I think. So less about a specific ad, but just more about the experience of that.
Mm. Yeah, and I know that experience because in college, a friend of mine, I didn't have a VHS player growing up. Like when I was really little, we didn't really have one. So we didn't record things off the TV. But my friend in college, my roommate, she had all these like cartoon specials that had aired on TV and had recorded all of them. And so we watched a bunch of them when we lived together. And yeah, it was like all the toy commercials that you saw as a
Mm.
kid. And like, we're like, oh my God, that one. I don't know if you guys would have this in the UK, but there's that commercial that was played constantly when I'm sure Brandon would know this one, the Folgers coffee commercial around Christmas time, where the guy comes home and makes coffee and his family wakes up and they're really excited he's there. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah. So like that one, it's, I mean, it ran forever. So it's one of those, it's like between that and the Cadbury Bunny commercial, it's like those are the ones of my childhood, I think, that like really are memorable.
Mm.
But
We had I don't remember that one. I don't know if that's a brand that's over here, but we had a series of coffee commercials over here. And it started with one commercial where either a guy moved into a flat or a woman moved into a flat. I can't remember. And unpacking. And so they want to make a coffee and they haven't got any, I think it's sugar or maybe milk. I can't remember. And so whichever one that's just moved in goes across the hallway to the other one. Obviously, there's this sort of spark between them. And let's say it's him that's moved in. He asks, can he borrow some sugar or some milk or whatever it is? And that's the end of the advert. And it was so successful and everybody wanted to know what happened. They made another one with the same couple and a slightly different part of the conversation. And that was so successful. They made another one of the same couple. And it was this whole thing.
I know there was one that I saw like that over here. I'm wondering if it's the same one. Like
it could well be.
It's like the actor, the British actor has gotten kind of famous. It's like he was playing like I wonder, it's the guy that, if you've seen Ted Lasso, or he's the guy that he's the former owner of AFC Richmond.
He was in Buffy.
Buffy, yeah. He was also, he was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, I can't remember his name now, but yeah, so that was the same commercial. Yeah, that became a series of commercials where people were so invested in this relationship that the company kept releasing them.
Yeah.
You're onto a marketing gold when you get that happening, right?
Yeah.
Just living rent free in people's heads. So as we've gone well over the hour, where can people find you online if they want to hit you up, hire you, whatever?
Yeah, of course. So if anything I've talked about in terms of the learning and development program, Supercharged Creative Leaders, resonates, and people need some help approaching their creative career, you can go to growwithadamjennings.com. All the details about the program are on there, and specifically that entire landing page is written in language that helps you sell it into your boss. It tells your leadership the return that they will get from your attendance in it, the benefits that their agency, their creative studio will have by paying for you to attend the course. So you can go there, you can find out all about the course, and you can book it up. If you want to get in touch with me, I offer sort of sessions outside of that training, or if you want to hire me to work on something, you can either find me at adamjennings.com, or you can find me on linkedin.com/in/Adam Jennings. I am. Just search for Adam Jennings and you'll find this ridiculously rugged picture of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. It was nice getting to chat finally. So
thank you. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for the questions and the time.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on social media at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. To learn more about the show, visit scratchclawpush.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2024 by Carcutta Media, LLC, all rights reserved.